At what point did explorers in the Americas go, "Yeah, this is an India"? By at least 1498. In his third journal, Columbus writes, "I have come to believe that this is a mighty continent which was hitherto unknown. I am greatly supported in this view by reason of this great river, and by this sea which is fresh." Italian explorer Amerigo Vespucci is at least by some credited with this discovery. Maps made in the early 16th century based on his travels were the first to use the name America for the new continent, it being named after Amerigo. So here is an interesting problem. Contrary to popular belief, people who opposed Columbus's expedition didn't do that because they believed the Earth was flat. That wasn't a thing in medieval Europe. The fact that the Earth is a globe was widely accepted among those who cared about such things. And its size was also roughly known. Columbus underestimated the size of the Earth distance to Asia by a large margin in his own calculations. The worry was that the expedition's supplies would end long before they reached India, and Columbus's opponents were trying to prevent that. Which begs the question, when first reports of Columbus finding land arrived in Europe, did anyone immediately realize that land wasn't India? I think the general absence of butter chicken and naan anywhere might have been the first clue. 1500 at the latest, the Portuguese had already pioneered a sea route around Africa to the Indian Ocean for trade. And in 1500, they sent someone to check out reports of land seen in the southern Atlantic and discovered Brazil. They realized it was a new continent, not just an island, reported it back to Portugal, and then continued on to India. Since they had been to India and knew what it was like, they were well aware that Brazil was not India. Also, the Spanish explorer Balboa crossed Panama and saw the Pacific Ocean in 1513. So even if some people might have still been trying to argue it might be a part of Asia, that put it to rest. 30 minutes in and no dance numbers. Amerigo Vespucci had the intuition of it being a new continent around 1503. I can't searching for data now, but I think that around 1520, after Magellan's circumnavigation of the globe, it was known that it was a new continent. Columbus carried an interpreter, Luis de Torres, with knowledge of the languages of Asia. He knew on the spot that they didn't talk like Indians. So it's an interesting story. The ancient Greeks knew the general circumference of the Earth. An educated person in the 1400s would have known this as well. Columbus thought otherwise. His pitch was basically, what if the Earth is much smaller than we thought and India is way close? Then we could get spices real easy by boat. Quote, many didn't buy his claims. He traveled far and wide with this pitch. There were a lot of places nearby Western Europe that were being discovered left and right. As ship technology got better, Portugal and to a lesser extent Spain kept on finding new places to them, and trade routes, etc. Portugal didn't want to fund a risky mission into the middle of nowhere, when they were already getting plenty of return staying relatively safe. Spain, the upstart that had just kicked out the Moors, wanted to go to a place Portugal wasn't already swarming around. So the king and queen funded Columbus's expedition, knowing that he would almost certainly not be finding India, also expecting that he and his crew would just simply perish. But it was a risk they were willing to take to find potential new resources. So Columbus may have speculated he was not in India several years later, but it's almost certainly that everyone else involved knew they were looking for something that likely wasn't India at all. This isn't India? Question mark, exclamation mark. When they couldn't taste the spices in the food. Actually, good question. Most early explorers suspected Columbus was wrong. Columbus was using a bad calculation for the circumference of the Earth. He wasn't proving the Earth was round, as that was well known. As soon as word arrived that he didn't die, most people knew it wasn't India, simply because he didn't have nearly enough resources to make it across the ocean that they thought was there. He only planned for a voyage of 2,400 miles when it should have been 4 times that. That's why it was so hard for him to get sponsored in the first place. Columbus died still believing he had reached Asia. Don't credit me on this, but I clearly remember learning in history class that many people called BS on Columbus reaching India when he returned to Europe, not because they thought the Earth was flat, but because they thought he didn't go far enough. I'm pretty sure there were other explorers who proved it by tracking across Panama to reach the Pacific. All of this is of course based on memories of middle school history class, so it's probably not accurate, but I at least know that they figured it out pretty early on. Columbus didn't think he was in India. I think he believed he was in some new islands just southeast of Japan. The size of the Earth was more or less known to a very close degree by 1492. Even the Greeks were respectably accurate. Nobody expected the Americas to show up, but it wasn't assumed at all that Asia was that close by any serious scholars of Columbus's era. Columbus himself believed the Earth was somewhere between 1/3 and 1/4 smaller than what scholars thought, and he initially thought he had found Japan. Not India, but the East Indies. This is why he was turned down several times by potential investors, many of which being royal courts, because conventional wisdom dictated he was already entirely wrong. So, pretty much every explorer after Columbus more or less already knew that Columbus had not reached the East Indies. He reached something that might provide a convenient commercial route to the East Indies, thereby avoiding the Ottomans altogether in trade. But that fabled Northwest Passage never materialized. Europeans believed the west of the Americas harbored a route to immense wealth for centuries. But the notion that Columbus actually sailed to the East Indies was never a serious one once he returned. Wait a minute, was I today years old when I learned why Native Americans were called Indians? ? When they realized there was no one to help with tech support.
If you enjoyed this video, please check out our playlists full of similar content. Epic Aircast is like doom scrolling for your ears. Please like, share, and subscribe.